Let's paint some mountains with a field of flowers, but first let me show you how to paint some clouds. So taking my mop brush, I'm doing light blue and white strokes near the top of my canvas, and at the very top, blend in some dark blue. That's going to give you a good background for your clouds. Now taking a size 8 round brush, I'm going to dip into some white paint and start doing little circular brush strokes. I'm moving the paint around and around, making sure it's not a perfect circle, and I'm not going to dip it back into any more white paint unless I absolutely have to, because the more and more I work the paint, the fluffier it's going to start looking, especially around the edges. See how that's starting to fade out? And then once I get the shape I want, I'm going to dip back into some more white paint and highlight inside with more circular motions. Add those highlights in different places, and then don't be afraid to add a couple clouds. I'm going to add one up here in the corner. I took some white paint and I'm just spreading it around and around, working the paint out. Don't be afraid to have it going off the canvas. Don't forget the bottoms of your clouds. See how I turn the brush upwards to do the bottom, and then go back in the middle and highlight a couple more places. Now let's paint some mountains. I'm going to do a line of dark brown underneath my sky and then do an outline to design my mountain peaks. I'm going to have 3 different peaks, and notice how they're not all perfect points. They have lumps and bumps and slightly curved at the top. I'm going to fill those in with some dark brown for the underpainting. And then grab a pencil. I'm going to draw a wiggly line from the top of each of my mountain peaks all the way down to the bottom. And this is going to give you a guideline for highlighting and shading on your mountain. I'm even going to do one right in the middle there. Now you could use a palette knife, but I'm going to use a flat brush because I think that's a little easier for beginners. Taking a little bit of white paint tinted with some dark brown, I'm going to start taking my brush and pulling some lines down on an angle from the right side of my wiggly line. See how I'm feeling that curve, but I'm not going all the way to the other side? This is the highlighted side of your mountain that the sun is hitting. Notice how I'm using the flat side of the brush along the edge of the line and then turning it the other way to feather it out. You're using the underpainting as part of your shadow, so make sure some of that can peek through. Look at that, they look like mountains. But let's add some shadows. I'm going to put a little bit of blue in with my dark brown and start doing the same stroke on the left side of each of those lines. Still going down on a curve. Play around with the highlighting and shading. It's really going to surprise you how much fun this is. I'm going to even take a little bit of white and dry brush it on to make some of the shadows look a little bit more varied. If you want it to look like snow-covered mountains, you can even add brighter white towards the peaks along that line and just have fun with it. I'm probably going to keep playing with it over and over, but I suggest you step back every once in a while because it really will surprise you. Now let's fix up the bottom of our mountains with some black paint, and I'm just going to do back and forth strokes with some dark green and black towards the bottom of my canvas for my underpainting. This is going to act like a shadow for our field of flowers. But first, let's take a fan brush and add some trees in the distance. I'm turning the brush sideways and just bouncing it across the left and the right side of my mountains. I'm also going to tap in a little bit of green over top of them, make sure they're all different heights. And see how the bottoms look a little funny? I'm going to take my fine artist sponge with some dark and light green, maybe a little bit of black, and bounce in some texture all the way across. There! Maybe take my round brush with some black paint and add some shadows underneath those trees. Now for the field of flowers, I'm going to try as many colors as I can from this new line of paint called DecoEARTH. It's actually made from recycled house paint, which is so cool. It's made by DecoEARTH, and they reached out asking if I wanted to try it, so I'm going to try adding as many textures and colors as I can just to test it out and see what it can do. I'm going to create some hills with my mop brush here. Now, I had no idea that 75 million gallons of house paint is thrown out every year. So they actually found a way to collect that nationwide, all over the United States, and reprocess it, taking out all the harmful chemicals and materials and turning it into a water-based acrylic. I'm trying so many different things just to see how it works, and it so far works almost exactly the same as my regular water-based acrylic. However, I will say it is thicker, so it has much better coverage, probably because it's made from house paint, which I still think is so cool. I can't get over that. Notice I'm just adding some patches of dirt and grass here. Another thing I'll say is it has a matte finish, so it doesn't dry glossy like other indoor-outdoor paints. Perfect for painting pictures like this one. Now I'm going to connect the dark shadow portion of this painting with the midsection where the hills are, just with taps of green and browns and tans, maybe a couple bushes in between there, to make it look natural for our field. I'm also going to add some tiny grasses in the back with a fan brush, just light little upward strokes. And let's add some larger grasses down at the bottom with some green, yellow, and white. I'm always doing upward strokes. They can be leaning over top of each other and fill up this whole black area down here. The black is going to act like a shadow. Always pulling upward. Never pull from top to bottom because your grasses will look upside down. I know I say that every time. With the size 0 detail brush, I'm also going to add tiny grasses all throughout, doing the same brush stroke, always pulling up. I'm going to do a couple patches down here in the middle. Perfect. And with the size 5 round brush, I'm also going to do a couple larger strokes. I'm pressing down harder and curving the brush stroke out. These are just going to look like bigger leaves thrown in there for behind our flowers. Now, the first flower I'm going to show you how to do is a daisy with a size 3 round brush and white paint. Make a dot for the center and then press down and curve a brush stroke into the center. We're going to go around in a circle, spacing them out almost evenly, pressing down harder at first and then curving it up towards the center. Notice how they're always curving into that center point. And then while it's still wet, we're going to add a little bit of shading with some gray, always starting in the center and pulling out from that center point through each petal. There we go. I'm also going to tap in a dome shape a little bit of yellow for the center, and then with some dark brown paint, I'm going to give it a smile. That's going to give it a little bit of a shadow. That's how you paint a super simple daisy shape. I'm going to do this again, going around in a circle, curving each of the brush strokes into the center. And then while it's still wet, I'm going to take a little bit of gray and brush out from the center. That's going to give it shading. Don't forget the yellow and give it a smile. I just added a couple, but you could add them anywhere you want. Also, don't forget to add a few stems with dark green. Now let me show you another type of flower. This is just a generic pink wildflower. I'm going to do 3 strokes each flower. 1, 2, 3. See that? Does not have to be super perfect as long as there's 3 points somewhere at the top and they meet down at the bottom. Bigger ones towards the bottom because they're closer to you, and tiny ones in the back. I'm also going to add a couple teeny tiny taps just way in the back. And then I'm going to mix some brown in with my red. It tells you whether or not it's opaque or transparent on these bottles, by the way, which is super helpful. Taking a little bit of that color, I'm going to add some fronts to my flowers by not covering the blob all the way to the top, but I'm just doing a couple strokes further down, covering the bottom and up about halfway. See what we're doing here? We're making it look 3-dimensional. Don't forget some shading on the ones way in the back. But this is going to make it look like an open flower instead of just a single flat flower. Don't forget to take your detail brush and add some stems. And then I'm even going to add some taps of yellow and white up in that bright area to make it look like there's something in the middle peeking up through. Very cool. And as a final touch, when they're dry, add some highlights. I'm taking some brighter pink with some white and just dry brushing down from the top of that shadow layer. And that's going to start making the flower look really 3-dimensional. See how easy that is? They could be open tulips or poppies or whatever you want. I don't know what kind of flower they are. They're just one of my favorite ones to paint because they're so simple. Don't forget some highlights in the back. And then let's try out all the cool colors. I'm taking some dark blue and a detail brush and tapping into a lilac shape, just tiny little dots. And then on the dark blue, I'm going to add some purple and then a couple tiny light blue dots to give it highlights. Go from dark to light. That's what's going to make them look 3-dimensional. Can't forget some way in the back too. I did them all over. Don't forget to add stems and grass where needed. It's really up to you how much detail you do, but as a final touch, I'm going to take my fine sea sponge and a tiny bit of white paint and add just a little bit of accent white flowers all throughout the back to make it look like the daisies go all the way through. I am so ready for spring. I don't know about you. If you enjoyed this tutorial, follow me for more. And if you want to learn more about DecoEARTH, check out the link in my bio and the description. I'll have more information for you there. Have fun and happy painting.